Our allies are openly mocking us. It's no longer something that happens behind closed doors or in private conversations. It's out in the open, and it's happening more and more often. Over the weekend, during a high-profile meeting at the Notre Dame Cathedral in Paris, two prominent European leaders were caught on camera mocking former U.S. President Donald Trump's infamous handshake. President Emmanuel Macron of France and Prime Minister Donald Tusk of Poland were seen exchanging looks and making subtle gestures as they observed Trump's awkward and over-the-top handshake. This wasn't just a private joke among them. It was something they felt comfortable enough to share with the world. Tusk even posted a comment on social media, writing, "Handshakes with Donalds are usually quite a challenge." And with that, they were openly mocking him in front of the public, a humiliating moment not just for Trump, but for the United States itself. This isn't just a trivial matter of a botched handshake. The mockery is symbolic of something much deeper. Trump strained relationships with his allies during his presidency. He built a reputation for bullying, belittling, and undermining those who were supposed to be America's strongest partners. Whether it was through his unpredictable policies, his aggressive rhetoric, or his lack of diplomacy, Trump's behavior left many wondering whether the United States could still count on its allies. And now, it seems those allies have had enough. They're no longer pretending to support him or make nice. Instead, they're calling out his behavior, and in some cases, openly laughing at him. The incident in Paris is just the latest in a growing series of moments where world leaders have openly mocked Trump. But it's not just limited to Europe. This trend of world leaders pushing back against Trump's policies and rhetoric is being felt across the globe. Take Canada, for example. It's not just the Liberal Party in Canada that has been critical of Trump's bullying tactics. Even the New Democratic Party and the Conservative Party have found common ground in their opposition to Trump. For a country like Canada, which has long prided itself on maintaining cordial relations with the United States, this is a significant shift. These political groups rarely agree on much, but when it comes to standing up to Trump's behavior, they are united. They've all come out publicly to say they won't tolerate the kind of bullying Trump regularly displayed during his time in office. This kind of unity is rare in Canadian politics, and it speaks volumes about how toxic Trump's relationship with his allies became. In Mexico, we saw President Claudia Sheinbaum take a firm and unequivocal stand when Trump threatened to impose tariffs on Mexican goods. She made it clear that Mexico wasn't going to take such threats lying down. In a bold move, she threatened to retaliate and cause real pain to the U.S. economy by targeting key American companies that have a significant presence in Mexico. It was a calculated move that not only pushed back against Trump's hostile trade rhetoric but also showed the world that Mexico wasn't afraid to stand up for itself. Mexico wasn't going to be intimidated by Trump's bluster, and it was a message to other countries that they didn't have to bend to his will. This moment demonstrated the growing frustration and defiance from countries that had previously been forced to tolerate Trump's aggressive tactics. And it's not just Mexico that's been pushing back. The Bahamas, a small island nation that often gets overlooked in global politics, also stood up to Trump when he suggested they take in migrants from other parts of the world. Trump had suggested that the Bahamas should accept people who had been displaced or stranded by various global crises, as if the Bahamas had the capacity or resources to deal with such a burden. But the response from the Bahamian government was swift and firm. Absolutely not. This was a clear rejection of Trump's disregard for the sovereignty of smaller nations. It was a bold move for a country with much less influence on the world stage to say no to one of the world's most powerful nations. But it was also a powerful statement about standing up to a bully, something that more and more countries were beginning to do during Trump's time in office. Even in South America, we're seeing a shift in how world leaders respond to the United States. Countries like Brazil, Argentina, and others have started to express their concerns more openly about the United States' approach to foreign policy under Trump. And while Trump's policies may have served certain political or economic interests in the short term, they alienated key partners who had long been allies of the U.S. What's interesting is that many of these countries, which have traditionally had positive relationships with the U.S., are now looking for new alliances. They're building stronger ties with other global powers, such as China, who is more than happy to step in and offer support to countries that feel neglected by the U.S. under Trump. Let's talk about China for a moment. Under Trump, the U.S. found itself in a trade war with China. The two countries engaged in an ongoing back and forth of tariffs, sanctions, and economic posturing. But here's the thing. While Trump was focused on this trade war, China was quietly playing the long game. President Xi Jinping saw an opportunity to build stronger relationships with countries that were once firmly in America's sphere of influence. Take Latin America, for example. While Trump was busy alienating these countries with his rhetoric and policies, China was offering trade deals, investments, and diplomatic support. She reached out to South American and Central American countries, offering them alternatives to the US's heavy-handed approach. China's message was clear: we respect your sovereignty, we'll help you grow, and we're not going to bully you into compliance. This approach was in stark contrast to Trump's tactics, which often involved demands, threats, and an unwillingness to respect the independence of other nations. In fact, China's growing influence on the world stage during Trump's presidency was something that many analysts pointed out. While Trump spent much of his time bashing allies and undermining international institutions, China was quietly expanding its influence across the globe. President Xi's leadership style was often contrasted with Trump's erratic approach. Where Trump's policies seemed to alienate partners, Xi's approach was about fostering relationships and creating economic opportunities. And the more Trump's leadership was seen as reckless and unpredictable, the more countries began to turn to China for support and stability. Now, let's take a moment to reflect on the US during Trump's presidency. There were many instances where Trump was ridiculed on the world stage. Remember the time he spoke in front of the United Nations and claimed that he had accomplished more than any other US president? The response from the international community was swift, and not in the way he hoped. Laughter. Trump's speech was met with laughter from other world leaders. It wasn't polite applause or even a respectful response. It was open mockery. And what did Trump do in response? He brushed it off, claiming that the world was laughing with him, not at him. But the reality was clear. World leaders were laughing at him. And not in a good way. They were laughing because they saw the United States led by a man who didn't understand the intricacies of international diplomacy. They were laughing because they knew that his policies were often short-sighted and destructive to the global order. This isn't a case of global leaders merely poking fun at a political figure. The laughter and mockery reflect something much more serious. It's about how the world views the United States when it's led by someone who prioritizes ego over diplomacy, who sees allies as adversaries, and who undermines long-standing international relationships for the sake of personal gain. The mockery stems from a genuine fear of what Trump's policies mean for global stability and security. Allies feared that the US under Trump was unreliable, volatile, and unable to work collaboratively with other nations. And enemies saw an opportunity in Trump's reckless actions. They knew that Trump's unpredictability could create openings for them to further their own agendas. Even state-run media in Russia had a field day with Trump and his administration. Russian TV took aim not only at Trump but at his wife, Melania. They aired segments mocking her, making crude jokes about her appearance, and discussing her in a derogatory manner. This is the kind of behavior that shows just how far-reaching the ridicule of Trump went during his presidency. It wasn't just a matter of political leaders making fun of him. It was media outlets in hostile countries exploiting his every misstep for laughs. This behavior isn't unique to Russia. We saw it in other parts of the world, too. During the Trump administration, it became clear that international diplomacy had taken a back seat to personal vendettas and populist rhetoric. Leaders who once might have been cautious about criticizing the US openly no longer felt the need to hold back. They weren't afraid to point out Trump's flaws, and they weren't afraid to do it publicly. When Trump invited President Xi Jinping to his inauguration, the response from China was telling. She declined the invitation, but instead, China strengthened its ties with Russia. Russian President Vladimir Putin's influence grew, and this newfound relationship between Russia and China became an important factor in global geopolitics. Putin and Xi strengthened their alliances, in part because they saw the opportunity to fill the vacuum left by the US's erratic foreign policy. As the US pulled back from traditional alliances, Russia and China moved in to fill the gap. It's hard not to look back and see how far the world has come since Trump's time in office. The impact of his leadership, for better or worse, has left a lasting impression on the international community. His policies have reshaped relationships, redefined alliances, and left many wondering about the future of US leadership on the global stage. But the lesson is clear. Leadership matters. The way a leader treats their allies, the way they respond to criticism, and the way they carry themselves in the world all have consequences. Trump's time in office was a reminder that the world expects more than just a leader who can make bold statements. It expects someone who can navigate complex international relationships with tact, respect, and a willingness to collaborate. As we move forward, it's crucial to stay informed and engaged. The world is watching, and so should we. As we continue to examine the repercussions of Trump's presidency on global relations, It's important to understand how these dynamics have shaped the way the United States is viewed today. Thank you for watching, and as always, don't forget to hit the like button if you found this video informative. Make sure you subscribe to the channel so you can stay updated with the latest news and analysis. We'll keep bringing you the stories that matter. Stay tuned, and we'll see you in the next video.